in executive session discussing personnel and legal issues. Please join me in Pledge of Allegiance. So we have a start to the meeting that is bittersweet. I am happy and sad to announce that we are losing Commissioner Lisa Borowski to the State House. So really want to express our appreciation to Lisa for everything she's done for 5 years as a commissioner, school board member before that. Has served her community with integrity, passion, compassion, always there for the residents, always bringing a really good perspective to the board in our conversations here. It was a big part of why I'm here. I don't think that I would have taken the chance to run for office if I hadn't gotten to know Lisa and understand just how much she loves what she was doing as a commissioner. And I know it's really hard for her to say goodbye. It's hard for all of us to say goodbye. But I did want to take this opportunity to express our gratitude. I'll allow Lisa to say a few words, and then I have a plaque for you. So, and then we actually will have to vote to accept your resignation. So do you want to address the room?
So I just want to say thank you all so much. These 5 years have been amazing. When I served on the school board, I thought I knew everybody in the township. But coming to this side of the work, I got to meet a whole new group of people who are passionate and engaged and excited about our community, who love our community. And I felt like we've got a lot accomplished. So in the 5 years, definitely the beginning was a little rocky when I first started, but we have accomplished so much, and I will credit that not only to my colleagues, both past and present here on the Board of Commissioners, who are also very passionate and very knowledgeable and caring about our community, but really to our fantastic staff. So I hope that our township fully appreciates and realizes what an incredible staff we have assembled here in the township. It has been really my honor and privilege to work with them. They work so hard every single day to make sure that we have everything we need, to make sure that Radnor is the very best place to live, and putting their own personal lives on hold, putting everything before this. I've watched almost every single one of them do that on one or more occasions. So I just really want to thank and acknowledge our staff, and I hope that I know that we leave the township in really good hands, and I'm so proud of all that we've accomplished, especially that Darby Paley Road and getting that water piped underneath Darby Paley Road. It's like the best accomplishment. And if anyone's driven on Darby Paley Road, it's like glass now. So watch your speed. So to our staff, and then also I just really want to also thank John Rice. When I started here, I didn't know anything. And John was my touchstone. John, I don't even know how many times I used to call John in a week, and sometimes in a day. And he was never too busy, never, never a question too stupid, and he really helped guide me and ground me. And John, I'm really grateful and appreciative for that. So to everyone, and certainly the Ward 4 residents. It's really been an honor and a privilege to serve you. So I look forward to working with everyone. Steve and Kevin already gave me some really good ideas for some new state legislation, so we'll start working on that. And I hope that everyone will continue to reach out and let me know when I'm doing a good job, when I'm doing a bad job, or when there is a job that needs to be done. So thank you so much. I love Radnor, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. Thank you.
I will open it up for others on the board who might want to say something as we are gathering up front for a photo and a plaque. Anybody want to join me? Everybody come up. Let's get a big picture. In the meantime, I will read out the plaque. Radnor Township's Award of Appreciation is hereby granted to Lisa A. Borowski in recognition of your dedicated service to the Radnor Township community by serving on the Radnor Township Board of Commissioners. Please know the citizens, commissioners, and staff of Radnor Township sincerely appreciate and thank you for your outstanding service and lasting contributions to help make Radnor Township the best place to live, work, play, and do business on the main line. And Lisa, you deserve this and so much more. And thank you for your service, and I can't wait to see what you do for us in Harrisburg. I think the only thing left is to make this official, and I will ask all commissioners to vote with me to accept Lisa Borowski's resignation from the Radnor Board of Commissioners. Can I get a motion
So moved.
and a second? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
You are excused. Thank you, Lisa, for everything. I'm going to ask Commissioner Jones to tighten up the dais as we're down to 6 for a period of time. Mr. Rice, can you explain the process from this point on about replacing the Fourth Ward Commissioner seat?
Yes. The charter lays out what the procedure is when there's a vacancy in one of the elected offices. The commissioners, the remaining 6 commissioners, have 30 days to appoint a replacement. If that's not done for whatever reason, or if there would be a tie after a vote, then the 6 commissioners and the chairman of the vacancy board, which is a single individual, would then convene, and those 7 people would then vote and on the appointment and would fill the office. That's essentially it. It's not any more complicated than that. I think we've been through it a couple times in the last 5 to 10 years, but that's the procedure.
Thank you. It's my hope that we are able to vet candidates and hear from them at the next meeting, which would be December
12th.
December 12th. So there will be an announcement on the website of this vacancy. I did notice that former Commissioner Borowski put out a newsletter today and announced it in there too. So hopefully folks in Fourth Ward will know that there is an opportunity. But it looks like we would have to have a majority vote by December 28th. So that gives us 2 more meetings in this year to get there. So with this bittersweet announcement, I do encourage Ward 4 residents who would be interested in serving as an interim commissioner to fill out the term. No, until a special election in May, would fill out that interim period. Please send your letter of interest and a resume to Bill White, our township manager. You could send it to me, president of the board. You can find our emails on the website. And I think at the next meeting, we would allow some opportunity for anyone who is interested in the position to state their case and speak to the board, and then we will vote. So look forward to the process, and thanks for indulging us as we say goodbye to a beloved colleague. With that, I will open it up for public participation.
Sarah Pilling, 29 Garrett Avenue. I don't know how many people know, but we lost Susan Byrne 10 days ago, age of 62. She had a massive coronary and died in her home on Luella Court. I didn't know Sue terribly well, but we worked together on the abortive effort by Keating to redo the library with the post office and the ABC House. She was very instrumental when Luella Court, the Luella was developed. And we formed a community after the Keating issue called the RCPC, which went on for about a year, the Radnor Community Preservation Coalition. And then she worked on it while we were preserving the Willows Cottage. And just recently we had gotten together again and discussed the potential redevelopment on Lancaster Avenue. Luella, Susan was very quiet, but she was a real force in this township. And those who knew her were really grieving. And so many, because she was quiet, did not know, but it was very unexpected, and she died in her bed. I just wanted more people in the township to know it. Thank you.
Can I just comment? Can I say something? Could you share her information? Can you share her family's information so we can send?
Yeah, her obituary. Her obituary was in yesterday's Inquirer. And by the way, Hank Mahoney was her brother-in-law, a former president of the Board of Commissioners. But I'll send it.
So moving on to the consent agenda, is there any public comment on any item on the consent agenda? And is there any item on the consent agenda that a commissioner would like to pull to discuss separately? I will, not seeing any, I will ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda. And a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Thank you. So the first item on our agenda is a public hearing regarding cable franchise renewal for the Township of Radnor. Mr. Rice?
Thank you. The township is advertised for a public hearing tonight regarding the renewal of the Verizon franchise in the township. And this is something that is required under federal law, that the municipality that has the franchise hold a public hearing during some part of the process. The public hearing is required pursuant to Section 626 of the Federal Cable Act, which has the process for franchise renewal. The township's current franchise with Verizon is within the normal renewal window, and this is just the start of the process. There's no agreement up in front of the board or any action that the board's going to take tonight. So the hearing, this is part of the preliminary portion of that renewal process, and the purpose is for the township to review the cable operators' performance and identify any future cable needs. And this is just Verizon, not Comcast or anyone else. Tonight is for anyone who is here as a result of the advertisement to speak on this. If there's any public comment, any pro or con, any questions regarding the Verizon franchise renewal, tonight is the night. There'll be minutes of this meeting that'll be kept with the record on the franchise renewal process. This is the opportunity for the township to renegotiate its franchise agreement with Verizon. It's an ever-changing world in the cable industry. And the benefits of the franchise renewal process are state-of-the-art cable system now and in the future, strong customer standards. These are all discussed and will be discussed with the with Verizon. Service to community facilities, better reporting requirements from the cable operators, maximize franchise fees, which are really set, I believe, at 5% by the federal government. PEG channels, which are public educational governmental channels, PEG capital support funding, which the township does currently receive from the cable operators, legal protections of the township's rights-of-way, which is always an ongoing issue with cable operators, as Mr. Norsini is aware of, better mechanisms to enforce the franchise agreement. So these are the potential benefits. These are all discussed during the franchise renewal process. So tonight is an opportunity for any residents that want to make any public comment on Verizon and the existing cable system. So this is an opportunity then for the hearing to be open, Madam President, for any public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. I open it for public comment. Does anybody have any comment on the Verizon contract? I'm not seeing any, so we will move on. Thank you. The next item is the St. Honore land development. This is caucus.
So, Commissioner, if I may, I'll introduce the developer, Mr. Holloway, and his team. They are here for caucus. So no action is required of the board. They're here to present their project and answer your questions. They did receive a recommendation of approval from the Planning Commission. They did not receive a recommendation of approval from the Shade Tree Commission, but they're definitely allowed to move forward with their project regardless of those recommendations.
Thanks. Come on up.
How's everyone doing tonight?
Are you going to need the,
They're going to load it up right here.
yeah, we need the camera on. There we go.
So Dave Falcone here on behalf of the applicant, St. Honore Holding, and Cass Holloway and his team for the development here of what was a portion of the Hamilton estate, which y'all I'm sure are familiar with. There were just a little bit of background on kind of the Hamilton process. As you all know, there was kind of two separate sides to the project. Mr. Holloway and his team have acquired the single-family side, which is what you see here, and then there was another project on the other side of Stratford Avenue, which is, I believe, the subject of some litigation in the township. That is not a part of this application, and Mr. Holloway is not an owner on that side. So what we have here on this plan is a 14-lot single-family development. It was previously kind of before the board and approved as part of a 9-lot subdivision. And those 9 lots existed kind of as you see towards the top of the page. Mr. Holloway, after acquiring the property from the Hamiltons, acquired some additional properties located down here, and then ultimately put the original 9-lot subdivision on hold and integrated these lots into the overall project. The project originally had gone through planning as well as the shade tree as a 9-lot after Mr. Holloway had acquired ownership. So again, had come back through the process and was prepared to come back to you all when the process started with the additional lots. I note that because Mr. Norsini had pointed out we got hung up at the shade tree on a 2-2 vote at the last time we were before the shade tree. Prior to that, Mr. Holloway was there and received the recommendation of that body to move forward. I believe it was a unanimous recommendation at that first shade tree before we went back after we acquired these lots. The item of discussion, just to kind of hit it head on, as part of that last meeting with the shade tree, there's an existing tree located in this area that is coming down. But as was noted by the chairman of the Shade Tree Committee, Mr. Holloway is seeking no relief, no waivers of any kind with respect to landscaping or planting. So the project from that perspective is compliant. It was then moved to the Planning Commission where it received unanimous recommendation to you all for approval tonight. We have our team with us. We have our engineer, our architect, landscape engineer. We have Steve Schreiner here to talk about trees for anybody that wants to really get into kind of the trees that are out there. They've been studied. Mr. Holloway has met with the neighbors in this community on numerous occasions and walked the site on several occasions with both the neighbors as well as some folks from the Planning Commission and the Shade Tree, all as part of this development process. A couple of things that I'll note, I know that are significant and have come up through the process. Mr. Holloway is connecting the sidewalk. When the existing homes here were approved for development, there was a portion of the sidewalk which was not connected. So it's kind of just an empty area. Mr. Holloway has agreed to connect the sidewalk so it will run from the back of his community out to Eagle, down Eagle, and then down Stratford to the township line. So he'll go kind of, again, beyond his property. He's gotten approval to move it all the way down here and connect the sidewalk out there. Mr. Holloway has also exceeded township requirements with respect to stormwater. He's planning to collect a large amount of stormwater, again, as part of the addition of these units here, been able to collect a large amount of stormwater in this area, which is common space for the development, as well as collecting individual stormwater units with respect to the homes. The plantings have been kind of vetted by the township and its committees. And again, Mr. Holloway has spoken with many of the neighbors with respect to the project to get their feedback. I know a couple of them are here tonight to probably offer some thoughts on it as well. I'll turn it over now to Michael Boker, who will address from an engineering perspective our response to some of the engineering letters that we got from township staff. I think that might be appropriate. And then I think probably after Michael, we'll turn to Bern Panzak, who can discuss some of the landscaping. And then, unfortunately, I will be here if there's any questions for me later. You can get back to that. But we do have the whole team here, and Steve will be able to address any specific tree questions as well.
So just to address, in general, the letters will comply that we have received from the Township Engineer's Office, from Gilmore and from Gannett Fleming. As Dave mentioned, some of the comments in the letter are associated with sidewalk. We did meet with Mr. Norsini and a representative from Gilmore regarding the extension of the sidewalk on Stratford. And I believe the thought was to have that sidewalk maintained as a 4-foot wide sidewalk. That is what the existing width is on the sidewalk today, from the intersection of Stratford and Eagle to our property line. So the thought was to continue that sidewalk down Stratford as a 4-foot wide sidewalk. We do intend to install a 5-foot wide sidewalk along Eagle Road. And as Dave mentioned, we will extend the sidewalk past our property to connect to where the previously installed sidewalk terminated. We will install a safe landing refuge area on the opposite side of our proposed road, but will not extend that quite all the way to the property line. You can see there's a large existing tree here, and it kind of sits up on an embankment. So to extend our sidewalk all the way to the end of that property line would involve some excavation around that tree's root system. So we would prefer to keep it back at this point since there is no sidewalk that continues up Eagle Road. And we also, one of the waivers we're asking for is to not extend the sidewalk down the northeast side of the proposed road. It will extend on the opposite side and wrap all the way around the cul-de-sac. That affords us a great ability to provide a decent landscape buffer on that side of the road, and didn't feel it was really necessary for the residents since all the houses front the opposite side of the road. Stormwater management, part of acquiring these 2 additional lots did afford us, as Dave mentioned, the ability to install a large common system that will control most of this roadway that is then piped over to it. The original 9-lot plan had stormwater management systems located in the rears of these lots that we were able to move out and basically consolidate in this, and thereby lessen the impacts to the vegetation, the existing vegetation that you see along that property line. In general, just to describe the stormwater management, the site currently drains basically from the intersection of Eagle and Stratford through these lots, through our site, down to this corner of the property. So we currently propose systems that will collect over 80% of that drainage area, which today goes uncontrolled through their sites and our sites. And now we are going to infiltrate 100% of the runoff from that collected area into the systems that we propose on site. So there will be a great improvement to the runoff that the people see in this area. And in stormwater management, in taking down the residences on the 2 lots, the additional lots that were acquired, we see just about a 25% reduction in impervious coverage in this area, including these 5 houses. So not only are we going to reduce the amount of impervious located in that area, but we're going to provide additional stormwater management for that area, taking the sites back to their natural condition where no stormwater management exists today. Other than that, I will be here for questions.
I can't stay away. I have to just jump in real quick before burn. On the sidewalk waiver that we are asking for, I should note there was a fair amount of debate at the Planning Commission whether we should even put sidewalks at all inside the cul-de-sac. There were some members of the Planning Commission that thought we should not. We felt pretty strongly we should have some sidewalk system. Staff agreed with us that we should have some sidewalk system in there, but everybody agreed that kind of the other side would be too excessive. So that's kind of where we landed in kind of discussing it with staff and with the Planning Commission, that while we wouldn't get rid of them altogether, having it on one side seemed appropriate. I should also note that on the, I want to call it the north side, I guess it would be the northeast corner of the property on Eagle Road that Michael mentioned with that safe landing, what we also agreed to with staff was we would include in the community documents an obligation for sidewalk to be permitted there in the event sidewalk was ever installed north of the project, so that they wouldn't have any issues getting approval from the community to allow for that sidewalk to exist there to connect the sidewalk system. So there's just a small landing area, which is right here, which we're not extending we have the crossing with a safe landing here, but in order to save this tree, we're not going to install that little stub of a sidewalk because there's no sidewalk up this way. The township thought that was wise, and Shade Tree appreciated, again, saving this tree. But in the event these properties are redeveloped and sidewalk is brought down, the idea was we wanted to make sure we had there was an ability to make sure a sidewalk went there and they didn't end up in a dispute with the homeowners over that. So we agreed to include in our community documents a reservation for that right. So that's just a little bit of extra information. Jake?
Yeah. Dave, what do you mean by safe landing?
So I guess it's just in like an ADA flat area. Is that correct, Michael?
Yes. So safe landing area is basically just about a 5x5 pad of concrete on the other side. So if somebody did cross the road, they wouldn't be stuck in the road. They could go on the other side of the curb for that safe refuge.
Bern Panzak with Glack and Thomas Panzak, landscape architects for the project. Like we always do, we start with the township ordinances, and these ordinances were regarding street trees, buffering, street trees, of course, on the new road and on roads surrounding the property. There's a small piece of buffer requirement between these residential properties and the adjacent properties across Eagle Road. And then there are the tree replacement landscaping that is also required. Once we do that, we get out to the site, we review the trees that are existing, and we've been really looking at this project for many years now, back to the Hamilton subdivision that David mentioned earlier. Our general finding as we walked the site was that the woodland that's found there is in a degraded condition. We will be removing 165 viable trees. We'll be replacing those trees with 298 trees total. We've got the street trees, as I mentioned, that are along the roadway there. We've been before the Shade Tree Commission 3 times, and during one of those meetings, There were comments about how we decided to design that roadway with respect to groupings of trees. They preferred a distribution of trees in a more informal way throughout, and we've accommodated that, and we've changed our plan to conform to that directive. We've met with neighbors on multiple occasions. We've walked the site. We've analyzed property line conditions. Part of our tree replacement plan is providing buffering along the West Avenue neighbor properties. In addition to the street trees, there's a row of evergreen trees along that line. And as mentioned, there's a buffer requirement, and that buffer is what you see here, along with street trees and an evergreen component. We are seeking no waivers, as David had mentioned, regarding the landscaping, and the redistribution of the requirements that come out of the tree replacement have been, we think, distributed nicely around the site to provide buffering for neighbors as well as for the future residents of the property. There are several evergreen hedges between properties. There's been a discussion about extension of the sidewalk. We think that in addition to that sidewalk extension, an extension of a logical and beautiful streetscape along Stratford Avenue is sensible in terms of how these trees will relate to overhead wires and the future home lots that are being developed. Michael mentioned stormwater management and how we were able to remove the stormwater management basins from the rear of these lots here. And again, that gave us a little bit more flexibility with existing trees to remain. There will be tree protection arrayed around the property for those trees that will remain in this area. There's a rather large and beautiful walnut tree in this corner that will be protected, and there has been discussions with a neighbor, adjacent neighbor, and there's off-site trees that we are protecting with tree protection there. So that really is a summary of the landscape design, and as Michael said, we're here for questions.
I have just a couple. So how many trees are there now, and how many, you said 100 and how many? I didn't write that down.
Yeah, there are 100
160?
There are 168 to be removed.
Yeah, I was going to say 169. Okay. So out of any of those trees, just curious, how many of them are how many are heritage trees, like big, like the one that you're trying to save there? How many are invasives? How many are you trying to save those heritage trees?
Right.
That's my question. And then you can, put 3 trees, and I don't know the math for one big heritage tree, but it still may not do the absorption. So just, that's my first question, if you can speak to that. I think it's great that you're putting trees there. Just curious how that's going to line up.
Yeah, there are several heritage trees around the property. Several of them are in a degraded or decaying condition. Others are not. We would be replacing, those heritage trees with 6 trees. For every heritage tree, anything over 30 inches would get a replacement with six additional trees.
Can you be more specific on several?
Pardon?
Is there a number?
heritage trees?
Yeah,
Mr.
instead of several,
Panzak, could you share the tree table? That
Yeah,
was a
there's-
shade
it's in-
tree?
It's in the packet. You've got 6 replacement trees required for every 30-inch plus. Removing 7 and replacing with 42.
So I'm no tree expert, but are you, like, so if you have a 50 or 60-foot, say, silver maple, are you going to replace it with a similar tree that could be a heritage tree, or are they going to be like smaller, like dogwoods, or?
Well, they would be of the required.
Yeah,
yeah.
eventually they'll grow big, but
Right.
what kind of tree are you replacing a heritage tree with, like an oak or a large, a hardy maple or something, or are they going to be like a smaller, more ornamental tree?
Yeah, well, the way we do a landscape design is we get a requirement based on the tree removals, and there's a caliper inch calculation, and I guess that's shown in this area here. And there's different categories: 6 to 18, 19 to 29, and 30 and above. So there were 7 trees in that category. They would be replaced with 42 trees, of which 28 of those would be large canopy trees, like an oak or a maple or a sycamore or something like
All
that.
right, no, I'm happy, I'm happy with that answer. When it comes down to the cul-de-sac and whatnot, there's going to be plenty of room for trash and fire access. They can do 360s in that cul-de-sac. That's big enough. And then on the other side, I don't know, maybe the south side, if you can go back to that original map where it's with Stratford. Yeah, there we go. So if you look at the way where I'm looking at it, the south, I guess, left corner, there's 4 houses. Yeah, there you go. So they're going to have access to Stratford Avenue, correct?
Right.
Okay, so you can get a trash truck and whatnot in there. And that's it. One that's fine. And then one more question, Dave. What's the impact of the anticipated bedrooms? So when it comes to impact on our resources, the board here, the township, as well as the school board, can you speak to that? Thanks.
So
That'll be it for me.
there are existing homes, as you know, out on Stratford, so you'll see kind of minimal impact there. The additional homes at the top, there will be impact, but I can say that, as you probably know, Sean, in this zoning district, this could have been a much more dense project by code. So what Kaz did was he took a look at the houses that were there and said, I should probably build houses that are commensurate with the neighborhood rather than try and maximize density, which is kind of a novel idea for a developer.
You saw how the last maximizing of density worked out. So.
Right. So what he's done is tried to be kind of smart with the development and, produce a plan that fit the neighborhood as well as was kind of responsive and responsible with township services and provisions. And so that's kind of the way he went about this. He definitely did, upon acquisition of the property, I mean, as anybody would, you evaluate what maximum density is there. And even the lot sizes themselves in single-family homes could be smaller than you see here. So it's a larger lot, it's single-family, and it's done for one of those specific reasons, which is impact on services as well as consistency with the neighborhood.
Okay, and is that going to be, is the cul-de-sac a private road? Is that going to be maintained by the homeowners, or is that going to be?
We are seeking to have it dedicated.
So that's going to be a township responsibility.
To plow it and pick up trash and, yeah.
Okay, and are there any concessions to the township for that
Well, I think taxes,
on top of that?
I don't think so.
So no other, okay. Thanks.
Just to follow up with Sean's question, he asked how many bedrooms, how many beds?
So I don't know if we know 3 to 4 bedrooms.
And how big are the lots?
So this district allows a 7,000 square foot minimum lot size. Our lots average just over 10,000 square foot each.
I have one quick question. So you talked about the road. Sean got that. Is there lighting on this road?
There will be lights on the road. I think Byrne might be able to show the lighting plan.
Because neighbors always have worries about.
For sure, and it was something we discussed with the neighbors on the walks, so.
Yeah, we've got several lights that are evenly spaced along the cul-de-sac. There are house-side shields and the distribution patterns that really project the light away from the neighbors and onto the road. You could see, I guess, that little diagram there is a foot candle diagram, and each one of those triangles displays that same light distribution pattern. It was in no means an attempt to light the entire roadway, but rather just have sort of points of light down the street.
Yeah, I'm surprised it's actually on the road, not on the sidewalk. So the sidewalk basically will be dark.
Well, there's...
I mean, from your little circles there by each thing, it doesn't really.
Yeah, we were really trying to, kind of keep the roadway lit and not have the lights on the house sides. So that was an attempt to kind of be, resident friendly.
Right. And friendly to the back neighbors as well.
So
Right.
that was the primary concern there, was to not put lights on this side because they would shine off-site. We wanted to try and contain as much light on-site as possible.
Dave, so you're going to put up the fixtures. Who pays for the electricity and who's going to pay for the replacement of the fixtures? Is that a homeowners or is that if you're going to rededicate
The
road,
HOA.
so the HOA won't maintain the road, but they will maintain those light fixtures in that.
Yes, they'll be part of the HOA improvements, and they'll maintain them and replace them.
So if they get knocked down or something.
Yes.
Because they are in that it's a gray area.
It's
where
a gray
they're
area, but-
away, and you're going to.
It'll be an association improvement, and they'll maintain
So
it.
would the township need to vote on whether or not we take the dedication of the road, or is that kind of a done deal?
No, I think
a
the
separate
township has
vote?
to accept dedication.
One other question, that common, I call it that common area where you have the good stormwater management.
Yep.
Is that going to be accessible to all of the HOA, and sort of what's the plan for that?
So it'll be available. There's a path that's kind of here that we're allowing residents to get in here and access that. These residents obviously will have direct access, as will these folks, but it will not be kind of cordoned off to the community.
And it won't be public?
Will not be public.
And how big is that space? I mean, is it usable green space, or is it just kind of a patch of grass?
I think it's usable green space, yes. Not kind of an insignificant, like, nothing area.
Right, like a place to walk your dog, or, sit on a
Usable green
bench, or
space.
enjoy
Yes.
it. Okay.
Yeah, I want to go back to the tree replacement schedule. So 165 viable trees. So if you're doing the formula, I mean, Steve, are they in compliance with the formula, or are they going to have to add to the shade tree fund?
So if Ian could please zoom in on the tree chart that Mr. Panzak put up. And if Mr. Panzak, if you would step us through based on the ordinance.
Oh, this one or the compliance chart?
The compliance, the calculation, trees removed, DBH requirement, replacements, number of trees required for replacement.
Right. What was the question again?
Are you in compliance?
Yes.
So is the 298 what is required by the shade tree ordinance, or is there going to have to be either a monetary contribution to the fund or trees elsewhere in the township?
No, this is in compliance with the ordinance, tree replacement ordinance.
And then Dave, in the beginning, you mentioned there was a tree that was questioned by the Shade Tree Committee. Maybe you referenced it already and I missed it.
Yeah.
What was that issue?
So there is one tree, where is it burned? That one tree there that Byrne is identifying, that is coming down, and they had asked if we could relocate the driveway to save it, and that can't happen.
And what's the significance of that tree? Is it a heritage tree?
So it's not a heritage tree it's multiple stemmed. We have a picture of it. It's a big tree. I think it's 3 or 4 stems, and they had asked that it could be saved. And so it won't be saved, but we're making kind of the replacement for it. And I should note, Jake, you make a good point. So when you say 168 viable trees, so we walked the site with the township's arborist and with Steve, and all of the trees are not viable trees, but rather than take any credit for those, they've just deemed them all viable for replacement purposes. But if you were to go out on the site, you'd see lots of decay, trees down, trees that are diseased, and the township arborist agreed with that walk. So just for purposes, again, of replanting, that's how it just creates a higher replanting schedule, and it was basically a concession to that point.
Understood. And then my last question, it's not a question, it's more of a comment. The safe landing area, if it leads to nowhere, I'm failing to find the purpose at the moment. Like, do we really want people crossing to go nowhere? And do we have these areas in other places of the township?
So I can take that, Commissioner. Yes, we do. And as the developer noted, they're going to put sidewalk all along the south side and, around the bulb to a certain point. But that safe landing zone is for somebody who is on that side of the street. It's ADA compliant. They can get out of the street for whatever reason they're there, whether that's where the school bus picks them up or whether that's where they're dropped off or whether they're walking. As the developer noted, we did, myself, John Hosback, Damon Drummond, we did meet on site, and we concur with saving that large tree that's at the north corner of that, but thought it prudent to put the safe landing in compliance with ADA requirements.
Jake, there's the corner of Lowry's and Lancaster. There is literally a sidewalk to nowhere. But God forbid you're a college student, you're on the wrong side of the road, or cars go by. It's a 25, but they fly in that area. So there's like a post, and you'd have to kind of duck around it, but it would give you a level area to at least seek some shelter. There's a wall. Next time you drive by, you'll see it.
Yeah.
Doesn't make a lot of sense, but it is strictly subject to for safety.
Okay, and I appreciate that explanation. So is there a crosswalk that'll go across with the piano bars or whatever they describe them as?
That's just shown here, Jake.
So it was mentioned earlier that Shade Tree is not recommending. Can you tell us why?
Sure. So again, we had originally gone to Shade Tree with the 9-lot plan, and it was a unanimous recommendation. And then when we went back, there were only 4 members there, and so they split 2-2 on this plan, and it was primarily over that one tree. But that
the tree you have now saved, or the tree that's coming?
No, the tree that's coming down, which has been coming down in every plan, even back before Mr. Holloway had acquired the property. That tree has been slated to be removed just because it's been in every driveway design. So we don't know why they changed their minds on that. Again, all I can say is kind of the chair of the commission kind of encouraged them to look at the plan and the fact that no waivers were being sought, and there was just a stalemate. And so off we went to the planning commission. I wish I had better information for you, but I was.
I'll go back and watch the discussion. Are there any other questions or comments from commissioners?
Are there any crosswalks across Eagle? So I see you have just the crosswalk across your own road. but there are going to be quite a few people that are going to want to get to the farmer's market, and they're an easy walk.
There are no crosswalks across Eagle. Is that right, Michael?
And is there currently one at the Stratford intersection?
At Stratford and Eagle, no.
No,
It's a
there's
four-way
not.
stop, but there's no
So
crosswalks.
it's something to think about, because there are going to be a lot of people that want to get into that area.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you all. We'll see you again. So moving on to ordinance 2022-12. This is an introduction amending Chapter 263, Trees, revising the composition of the Shade Tree Commission, and amending Chapter 5, Administration of Government, Section 5-39A, Park and Recreation Board, to reduce the number of members of the Park and Recreation Board to 7 by eliminating the requirement that 2 individuals from the Radnor Township School Board be appointed. Ms. Cohen, is this you?
This is President Maroney. Thank you so much. As you indicated, this is an ordinance before you tonight, an introduction that takes into consideration evaluation of the composition of the Parks and Recreation Board. This has been discussed for quite a few months in evaluation in terms of sort of 2 parts. One, looking at the removal of the 2 school boards, so taking that board from a 9-member board down to a 7-member board of the Parks and Recreation Board, and then removing that requirement that requires an appointed Parks and Recreation Board member be assigned to the Shade Tree Committee, which is something that's been discussed at the Shade Tree Committee as well. So what would happen at that point, that member would now become an at-large member on the Shade Tree Committee, who would be appointed, obviously in desire with background in tree education, arboriculture, those kinds of things. As we just heard, there's a lot on the Shade Tree Committee's plate and a lot that they're evaluating, so they would be looking for that expertise and where that membership would be as they would continue with that at-large member. There would also be continued inner workings between the 2 boards, as there has been now. We have strong relationship back and forth, not only between the 2 staff liaisons, myself and Rick Foster, Director of Public Works, who's the staff liaison to the Shade Tree Committee, but also the 2 boards interworking in terms of projects related to parks, infrastructure that go on the agenda for the Shade Tree Committee, as well as the interests of current Parks Board members and going to Shade Tree Committee meetings, being there, having that discussion reciprocated back and forth, but just not being able to make that commitment to have a full appointment for 12 months out of the year. And we've been lucky in the last 4 years, it hasn't been an issue because Claire Gerton has stepped up and volunteered. She serves on the Parks and Recreation Board and has volunteered to go over and serve on the Shade Tree Committee as well. So of course we want to take this as an opportunity to thank her for her dual service membership there. So as I mentioned, the 2 boards would continue working together. There really would be no major changes other than the reduction, of course, of the membership on the Parks Board with regards to the 2 school board members.
And discussions with school board have been, I know, done at board level, but has staff engaged with the school district around removing these 2 appointments?
At this point, there has not been that discussion. In fact, those members have not been at the Parks Board meetings for several meetings, so there has not been that opportunity. And really, historically, this it's kind of it's dated that those 2 positions are there. It has its roots in the grounds maintenance agreement that used to exist about 13, 14 years ago that was removed between the 2, between the school district and the township, where the township, of course, was maintaining land in terms of their exterior fields and grounds, and then, of course, the Parks and Recreation Department was utilizing facilities. So that's where the history of that lies, which no longer exists. So, and obviously the membership isn't reciprocated on this end.
And just for some transparency, I have had conversations with the president of the school board about this, so it will not come as a surprise, and they understood that the history doesn't bear out to this day. And so I think we are in, you know, it's an amicable parting.
Yes.
I'll say that. Are there any comments from commissioners on this? Is there any public comment? I'll ask for a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. It was a unanimous vote. Thank you very much. Moving on to ordinance 2022-31. This is the introduction, establishment of ward boundaries required by charter, section 2.03A, typically referred to as redistricting. And I am going to ask Commissioner Larkin to lead us into this.
Okay, well, the small group with Commissioners Myers, Abel, and myself have now met with the public 3 different times, and also Ms. Holt. Ms. Holt has given us a collection of different maps. We met with her largely in order to establish the priorities that we wanted to set over and above the requirements at the state level, that we divide wards along census boundaries, that we provide wards which are contiguous, compact, and representative, and as a result, they are proportional. She has given us a couple of different options. The recommendation that we have is now ready for the board to review and discuss. We can absolutely have another conversation about the priorities that we put in front of everyone, but I think that we're at least happy, or at least mutually unhappy with the options that we have. One of the priorities that we set was that we asked her, and I kind of want this as kind of ground rule for the board just to know in advance, we asked that Ms. Holt would start with our existing map rather than redrawing from scratch. There are benefits to doing that, namely, if you knew your commissioner yesterday, you will almost certainly know your commissioner tomorrow. If we restart from scratch, then the likelihood is that there are a lot of people who are going to find out that they have somebody that they never voted for, they have no relationship with, and they have no real way of getting in contact with. So we kind of wanted to start with where we were before. Ms. Holt has worked with the township in the past. She helped us draw our boundary lines last time. She is, I think, now the only person who has that institutional knowledge of the 7 of us now. So with that, Ms. Holt, if you're ready to go. Thank you very much.
You are very welcome. So the board, or the committee, I should say, opted to present option B to you this evening. This was formulated based on the priorities that Commissioner Larkin had mentioned that we had set forth at the beginning of the process, or I should say they had set forth at the beginning of the process. One of the priorities was to try and reduce the number of wards that Villanova University is in. So shifting that population changed sort of the upper portion of Ward 3, where you can see it moved into Ward, or took population from Ward 1, what is Ward 1 now. And it also unified Eastern University, which in the current version had been divided. So in this proposal, Villanova is primarily in 2 ward districts, and there's a small portion of the student population that would remain in Ward 3.
Ms. Holt, can you, just 2 things. So a lot of people are this is the first time they
Sure.
might be hearing it. One is, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh,
and
sure.
why you are this kind of expert? Not just because you've done this for us 10 years ago, but, and then I'll ask you to speak a little bit about the priorities that were set, or you or Commissioner Larkin. But maybe just a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My redistricting journey began over 10 years ago now, back in 2011 with the statewide redistricting maps, and I was a lead plaintiff in the case that ended up overturning the maps at that time. I've stayed engaged in the redistricting process over this time period and served as an expert witness before statewide redistricting commissions. I also served on the governor's redistricting commission a couple of years ago.
Thank you. I just wanted you to brag a little bit about yourself. And either you or Commissioner Larkin, can you give us a little bit more about the sort of the ground rules that we gave you beyond reducing Villanova to lesser wards?
I'm thinking something. Okay. So, as was kind of highlighted, fewer changes to existing boundaries was better than more changes. Unifying student housing was another priority. Also avoiding instances where wards would cross residential streets and favor using, highways and more main arteries as the dividing point of districts was something that was given. There's also lesser consideration to trying to retain polling places within the wards so that it would be least disruptive to the voters if possible.
Thank you. Are you ready for us to ask some questions?
Sure.
Okay. I want to open it up to Commissioner Farhi. I see your light on.
Thanks. How about homeowners associations? I'll just speak in Ward 7, which is what I represent because I was not part of this. So Ward 7, there's a homeowners association called Trianon, and that's split in 2 wards. Have you made sure that you're not splitting up homeowners associations? If you're going to go through great lengths to kind of consolidate colleges, which I don't necessarily know if that's the best thing, and I can get to that in a minute, talk to me about the homeowners associations.
Sure. Homeowners associations wasn't something that was raised during the process.
It was. I believe I sent a letter.
I didn't hear about it, I should say.
Jack, did you share the letter that I sent to you about that?
I honestly don't recall at this point. I thought that we did. If not,
And I'm sorry, maybe if it was shared and I may have missed it. So I did not consider homeowners associations.
Okay.
I don't know that we specifically talked about homeowners associations.
No, I
but-
specifically
but-
did. It's important.
But,
and,
yeah,
you know, and-
I will, I'm not going to speak for Commissioner Larkin in his role as leading the discussion, but I think we made it a point multiple times and emphasized it multiple times that neighborhoods that shared similar issues or values should be kept together. And that was a discussion that we had at every meeting.
It'd be pretty disappointing. And that's not you. Villanova, for instance, it's how many it's currently in a bunch of different wards, and you're going to consolidate down to how many?
So currently it's in 4 wards, and this mainly consolidates the student population into 2 wards, and a small portion is in 3. So 3 would be consolidating to 3, technically speaking.
Okay. And is Ward 7, because apparently is Ward 7 getting more or less college students?
They will get a few more because right now it's pulling in part of the student housing that's in Ward 4.
Okay.
So it's about, it was like 400 maybe, or 100? Let me see how many were over there. Yes, it's pulling in 400. 243 in the new count, was 400 in the old count. 243. Okay. It's gaining 243.
And one last question. I see when it comes to 7, it looks like there's a little bridge. Can you explain that little?
That's currently how the boundary is.
This is current, or this is?
No, the Ward 7, as proposed, the only change was that to add the 243 students from Ward 4. The rest of it did not change. So that the little part you see sticking up is currently how the boundary is, and it's losing a little bit of does this show if I'm sorry, am I going to mess this up it's hard not to point. So a little bit of what's showing us Ward 4, right, sort of where that triangle is, had been in Ward 7 before. So it's moving that into Ward 4, and in exchange, these 243 students move in
to Ward 7, but that was the only change that was made. So that little piece there is a part of Villanova University. It's the Commons area, I believe, on campus.
Okay. But areas like Aldwin Lane and that area behind Lancaster Avenue, that's staying as is or not? 'Cause that
That's,
kind of borders the 320 Lancaster Avenue and that.
yes.
So like Villanova Road is one ward, and I think Aldwin Lane is another, or like one street is split in half. It's
Yes,
kinda
that's
weird.
taking care of that. It's, you said Aldwin, right? Aldwin Lane, yeah.
Aldwin, but then there's one street that's like half on one side. It's kind of random.
Yes, I think that should be corrected. If I'm thinking of the place you're describing, that should be
Yeah, that
corrected.
whole area is
Yes.
kind of,
It was a little wonky, so in doing that, we were trying to unify the neighborhood there.
thank you.
Yes.
Can you also, I found it interesting when I attended one of the subcommittee meetings, was the discussion about the census blocks. Can you let us know what those are, and don't we try not to split those, or can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that affected some of our choices, correct?
Yes. So when we're counted in the census, the smallest geographic unit used to count people is called a census block. It's a area that is determined by the census. The Census Bureau is the one that draws the census blocks, and these little census blocks are what form the voting precincts and the ward boundaries, and we are not permitted to change those boundaries. So however they've counted the people within those boundaries, and whatever those boundaries are fixed. And so when you're creating the ward boundaries here, we have to follow the existing census block lines that the Census Bureau created for this particular census.
Okay, and before we continue to get sort of very specific about certain wards, I know that in your presentation that I've read, you do some general, like, I know that I'm the commissioner for Ward 5. I don't think there are any changes. But so can you kind of just maybe ward by ward give us a general overview of maybe the effects that it would have on
Sure.
on each one?
Yeah. So the I think we described Ward 4 and 7, the change there, which is unifying that one little neighborhood or street, I should say, along Aldwin Avenue, and then moving the student population that was separated out into Ward 7. That's on the south campus. And then other common features, or the features of the map, I should say, the current boundaries of Ward 5 and 6 do not change in this proposal. And the boundaries, and the boundaries of Ward 4, I mentioned they just changed a little bit there, as well as Ward 7. And then Ward 1, 2, and 3 saw the most change, and these were related to the shifting of Villanova, most of the Villanova students that had been in Ward 3 into Ward 2, and the changes that triggered in moving that population. You're welcome.
Other questions or comments?
I'm just curious, is it because of that census block that I still have that little, Ward 3 still has that little peninsula of students?
Yeah, so that little census block that you see, that is one census block you see that's on the tail of Ward 3, and the census counted, I think it was 1,289 people as residing in that census block, and moving it created a greater shift in boundaries to move it into Ward 2. Although, in fact, on that census block, only 100 students actually reside. About 100 students, I should say.
And just for clarification, I know that I had heard at some of the committee meetings about whether or not elected officials were remaining in their wards. I think we solved for it that none of the seated commissioners are somehow being redistricted out of where they were elected in, correct?
So I was not provided, as I drew these maps, with the residents of any of the commissioners, but I have been told, although I still do not know where all the commissioners live, that no one was drawn out of their district in option B here.
Can we get an actual map like this with actual streets on it, the overlay with streets?
I think that was sent.
So Sean, there's a whole section on the website. It's got maps and you can zoom in, zoom out. It's really
Okay,
kind
this
of
would be nice if you
interesting.
had- If I had it here. I didn't-
Well, can I make a
Yeah,
few comments?
please.
All right, thanks. First, Ms. Holt, I want to thank you for your time. I thought the 3 meetings that we had were really productive. And to Commissioner Larkin and Commissioner Myers, I appreciated the opportunity to serve with you guys on this subcommittee. At the first subcommittee, we all we had the opportunity to talk about what our goals were and kind of list out the criteria. Some of those were mentioned here. I think it's important that we at least I give you my thoughts. I wanted to make sure that neighborhoods remained intact. Neighborhoods that shared similar values and had similar issues should remain together and should not be split into 2 different wards. Villanova, I thought, was a major issue, and I'm happy that we all seem to be in agreement that we wanted to reduce the number of wards. I wanted to get from 4 to 2. Some of the options that you provided would have gotten us to that point. And I thought it was important that they remained in wards 2 and 7, which seemed to have most of the issues with Villanova. So I thought the students should be voting in those wards as those are the commissioners that had most at stake. One of the issues that we talked about was trying to take away some of the jettisons that were in the map, and we wanted more blockish wards. It wasn't one of my criteria at the beginning, but I bought into that line of thinking, and I think that looks clean and fair for the township. I think some of the other options that you provided provide more blockish wards. And for that reason, I favored another option. And then the fourth criteria that I think that was discussed multiple times was we thought it was better that there'd be the least amount of change to wards as possible. Although I put a caveat in there at the beginning that I did not think one of the goals of the subcommittee or of this exercise should be to protect commissioners' wards if they were redistricted out. We brought a consultant in for a reason. I was reluctant that board members should be involved in this process, and after this exercise, I think if the township were to do this again in 10 years, I don't think members of the Radnor Board of Commissioners should be involved in this. I think it should be public-driven with a consultant running this process. Those are just my thoughts. But I want to get to this map, option B. One question for Commissioner Larkin. How did we land on option B? Because at the last meeting, we asked Ms. Holt to provide a revised option B and a revised option C. I didn't know that we were going to, it wasn't my understanding that we settled on one of those options at that time that would be put in the packet.
There are 2 additional options that Ms. Holt sent around. The problem is we have to pick one to advertise. So option B is the one that we've all seen in the past. That's the one that we were able to advertise. You sent a modified option B. My recollection is that that does not get Villanova into 2 wards. It keeps them in 3. You sent a modified version C, which I think does get Villanova into 2 wards, but it really radically changes basically every ward except for 5, I thought, when I looked at it.
Yes, 5 did not change in that, but I think it changed, it did change the option. I think it changed, yes, it changed all the other words.
Yeah, it brought 4 up above Lancaster
I know that's,
Avenue.
yes.
Ward 3 ends up straddling Lancaster Avenue more or less evenly. Ward 2 is just pressed all the way up against the township edge and nowhere else. So anyway, yeah, we had to pick one in order to put it in the packet, and the one that we had all seen, discussed, voted on, and shown to the public seemed like the one to do, particularly since the others didn't really meet the criteria that we had set out. I think that there's a reason why we got option B in the first instance instead of the modified ones.
Okay, I mean, that's fair, and I appreciate that, that explanation. Do you have the original option C handy that we could put on screen? So this is, I mean, this is the original option C, and this is the one that would get Villanova into 2 wards. I thought was more blockish than the other options, and yeah, I mean, it hits those 2 points. It seems like the issue became that it redistricted one of the sitting commissioners out. Again, you know, I'm sympathetic to that result, although I said at the beginning, I don't think that should be a criteria of this exercise. So the fact that I have problems with this process because we've essentially gone back and said, let's look elsewhere because the public that was present preferred this map. The institutions present at the meetings preferred this map. And my sense is that more than just, you know, the majority of the subcommittee probably would have preferred this map had it not done hit that one mark, and that is
Jake,
redistricting somebody out.
Which commissioner is out of the seat?
This is going to put Maggie Myers out of her district. I'm gonna be very transparent. To me, that's a non-starter. We have, you know, elections. People have elected their ward commissioner, and as welcoming on a new commissioner, I'm not gonna vote in favor of a map that would draw her out. I don't, or any of us. To me, it's just a non-starter. But I am only one vote.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. But the other point that I'd make, and while that would be a non-starter for me all by itself, this option, which is marked as option C, includes pretty radical changes to the 3rd Ward. The 3rd Ward doesn't extend above Lancaster Avenue as things stand right now. Now, in option C, it would end up invading pretty deep into the north of the township. It would take a big slice of North Wayne in the process of doing so. Those are just, and frankly, they would be upgrading, so do not misunderstand me, but those are not people who elected Anna Marie. Those are not people who have ever voted in the 3rd Ward. Those are people who have not gone to polling places within the 3rd Ward. And one of the criteria that we selected early on, and for good reason, was we wanted people more or less to be able to keep the commissioners that they elected, the polling places that they are used to, in order to keep them enfranchised as much as possible. So while absolutely an additional and sufficient reason in my mind to reject this option is because it would lose us a good sitting commissioner, it would also be insufficient in my mind for other reasons. And I also want to kind of stress, like, this is not a job that comes with a ton of power and prestige that we're all clinging onto with our fingernails. This is a job that it's really hard to get good people to run for. So when we tell someone like Dr. Myers, stress again, Dr. Myers, that she's not going to be eligible to run next time around, that's a bad thing for the township. And I said at the very beginning of this process, I don't think that that's necessarily the tail that should wag the dog, but I will look at plans with suspicion that do that. And since this would fail for me for that reason, I'm just not going to vote for an option that would lose us the commissioner.
So I'm hearing from you, Commissioner Abel, that there was another modified version of B that you had looked at that didn't maybe have, was that what you were referring to?
No. I was just saying that at our last meeting, we talked about modifying B and C. And my question, which Commissioner Larkin answered, was how did we arrive at the original B? Oh, the last point I do want to mention, and at the third subcommittee meeting, we had a resident who is in attendance tonight talk about some of the little neighborhoods that are represented here, and I'll just talk about Ward 6. It'd be the other side of Lancaster, which would include, what is that, Runnymede and part of West Wayne, which, I love representing that area, but the resident made a good point and a good argument that that neighborhood probably has more in common with Ward 3 than Ward 6. And so would we take a look at making those small changes to get those to update the map to reflect that?
Well, I think that is the revised B, essentially.
That's the only change in revised B?
Well, it gets rid of that little peninsula that sticks out.
Yeah, but
it uses
But it'd probably take
Blue Route
it'd probably take some of Ward 1 and move that into Ward 3 as well.
I think it takes some of Ward 3 and moves it into Ward 1. No, into 2, I'm sorry, into 2. It's blockier.
Ms. Holt, do you have the revised option B?
So I think what I'm seeing and hearing is that those little peninsulas are perhaps making us feel like it's, we're really finding it, right? So can you just, for all of our benefit, speak just a little bit to, if it were possible to show the current and then this version, is there a way to do that side by side? Just to see like where we're coming from and where the,
Sorry. This is the proposed B that's
Yeah.
before the board tonight. Over here is the revision. Oh, I should use the pointer. Don't strain myself.
Do you want as we are now?
well, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Like
Or you meant current boundaries. I don't know if
current
I have a
boundaries
current map with me.
and the,
I don't know that I have the current boundaries with me.
I guess I just don't recognize whether or not we have, how far off was option B from current?
So currently, the boundary, this is the current boundary up here.
Okay.
So that didn't change. I mean, right now, Ward 3 comes down over here. It has all of this. It was the largest district, and it doesn't come up above Lancaster Avenue. So that piece there cuts off. So this is all Ward 3. And you wouldn't really notice the change too much down here because, like I said, it's a small change as far as geographic area, that little switch we talked about right here. So this district doesn't change. Ward 4 doesn't change all the way along here. It's just right over here that it's changed. And with Ward 7.
What does 7 lose there? What streets, is that a street or?
That was the
Is that all?
Aldwin Lane. It's a census block area.
Okay, so Aldwin and that area would go to.
I can
To
pull up
2?
to show you. Hang on.
that would go to 2 or to 3?
Okay, so let me just quick show this, 'cause this is what you're asking about. Sorry, this is what you're asking about with your area here. This is a zoomed in version. So you can see here the changes that are outlined in this area. So there was this little census block here that had been in Ward 4, which was moved to Ward 7. And then this census block here had been in Ward 7, but was moved to Ward 4, and this is where that Aldwin Lane is.
So Aldwin's going to go to 4?
Yes,
Or to 3?
to 4.
I think Aldwin should
This
go
is
to
right here, this is
2. I
4.
think Aldwin should either go to 2 or
Maybe,
to 3. I think whatever that, where's Villanova Road? What's the other? That's where,
it's Aldwin, yeah, it is, Villanova, okay, so Villanova Road is here.
okay. Oh, so Villanova's always been 4?
So that's Villanova Road,
Uh-huh.
and Aldwin Lane runs through the middle here.
I think then, I mean, I don't want to lose constituents, but if I'm gaining some from Villanova, then Aldwin Lane should probably, it's just not it's like this weird arm of 7 that just never really fit in.
Are you talking about this little piece up here?
Yeah, that Aldwin, that's like more like a Villanova type of, it's like the only area in the 19085 area code that is in 7, but my feeling is there's like 3 or 4 streets, again, that it's kind of like a neighborhood block that should not be split up into 2 wards, just my opinion. So Aldwin should go with wherever Villanova University is, and wherever that, not Villanova University, Villanova Road, and there's another private drive that skirts up, or backs up to Sproul Road.
Okay. You might have to wake up your iPad. I don't know either. Yes.
It's Wooded Lane, so whatever Wooded Lane is, then that Aldwin Lane in Villanova, because Wooded Lane takes up a large road and a large constituency base. And that little section behind, that sandwich in that trolley area behind that should kind of remain the same, if that makes, if you want, I can meet you and we'll drive it or walk it.
So I think, we have had a 6-month process. Ms. Holt has, been walking us through it. We've had public meetings. We've had, maps that you can play with on the website. And we sort of have to move on this. So getting down to, streets and houses and, questioning the expert on where the lines are at this stage, there's been a lot of opportunity to do so, and we're being,
Commissioner
we
Maroney.
are being offered, a legitimate map that I think took into account everything we asked her to do.
Well,
And I would suggest that, we can continue talking about it, but I just want to make it clear that we're up against it. It's time to pass the redistricting. It's been 6 months. It has been done publicly. It has had, community engagement, a lot of discussion about certain elements. And, redrawing a map from the dais is not part of the process.
Well, Commissioner Maroney, in fairness to that, I sent Commissioner Larkin something who said that he either didn't get it or didn't respond to it. Now, if I attended those meetings, that could be perceived as a quorum, so I wouldn't really have any kind of, it's not easy to discuss, and because it would, there would be a sunshine issue, I think that it's best that I speak here now at a public meeting. But if my email would have been read and
No, I
thought
heard that
after,
too,
yeah.
and that's unfortunate, but I also heard from Commissioner Abel that the same concerns that you had expressed in a letter were key for him. So I feel like that was represented with or without the acknowledgement of the letter you wrote. And like I said, I do think that's unfortunate, but it sounds to me, and I went to 2 of them, and I didn't make it a quorum because I sat in the audience and didn't say anything. I was there to watch. They were all recorded. There was, opportunity to watch what was happening from home. So I'm just cautioning that this isn't where we're drawing the lines. It is not for the non-experts on the dais to be getting down to house numbers and streets. We have, hired the best expert around, and she's successfully done this for us one time, and I think, we need to just keep that in mind. I can't sit up here and redraw these maps, for each person to consider just their ward. So I'm just asking everybody to kind of take a look at it for the greater good of the community.
Well, I still prefer option C, but if we're going to look at option B, I would lean toward version 2 over the original.
And I think that's what Ms. Holt is proposing based on the conversations at the last subcommittee meeting was option B for, no?
This is a modified version of option B, which, as between the two, we're still in 3 wards for Villanova. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I'm agnostic between the two myself, which wasn't the question, but I am. We would have to re-advertise and bring it back for another meeting. This is still the November meeting, so John, would we be able to re-advertise this and get this done in calendar 2022?
Well, you're not, tonight is just introduction. So whatever you decide tonight
You're right.
gets advertised and comes back to you at your next meeting.
You're right, okay, withdrawn.
This has not been advertised yet. So you decide what you want to advertise, and it'll get advertised.
Is, for option B version 2, is there any, my recollection is there were only something like 47 Villanova students who were not in either Ward 7 or Ward 2. Does this increase the number of Villanova students that are in Ward 3, or is it still the same?
It is still the same.
That's what it looked like. So it's still 3, but it's, as a fraction of the campus, it's really, they're in 2 different spots.
But, and not speaking for Villanova University, the issue was, some of the challenges getting students to 3 different locations and knowing those 3 different locations as they progress through their university experience.
I don't want to say that I'm indifferent to 47 people's voting rights, but the risk of 47 people being confused is, in my mind, a whole lot better than the risk of the entirety of the campus being confused because they're voting in 4 different locations. If the overwhelming majority of the campus is in 2 instead of split evenly among 4, this is better. And you know this already, so I'm not saying this to you, I'm saying it for the benefit of the group. Villanova's student population is larger than any of our wards, so we cannot put them all into one.
And I will agree, 3 is better than 4.
The issue with the Villanova students is most of them don't vote. And my personal opinion is they shouldn't, in the sense of if they are residents, they have a New Jersey driver's license and New Jersey tags, and they live in New Jersey, and they go home for spring break and summer break, and fall break back to New Jersey or Connecticut or Rhode Island. So if they are part of the faculty or part of the clergy that live there, absolutely. But I think to a certain extent, they live in dorms. They don't live in apartments. A dorm is a temporary housing. It's housing that most people do not live there 12 months a year. You don't sign a lease. So there may be rules saying, yes, they live here, they can vote there. But realistically, unless that is their home and they are declaring residency in Pennsylvania, and most of them, and I will go out on record and say most of them, if not all of them, are not, we shouldn't be catering to that. If it was a state university and it's a little bit different where they could get a reduction in rent for being a state resident, that's one thing. So the 46 residents, yeah, for me it would be, are they like upperclassmen or graduate students? Is that a graduate student dorm that they're going to live there for 2 or 3 years and they're kind of immersed in that section of the community? But if they're underclassmen, freshmen, they're going to go from dorm to dorm to dorm, depending on, I don't think it's that big of an issue. I don't typically think that they should, if they're not state residents, we shouldn't be trying to get them to vote if that's not their primary residence. And a dorm, in my opinion, it's not a primary residence.
I'm going to vehemently disagree with you. I think that all of our college students who live in Radnor, whether it's Villanova or another school, are our residents, the same way somebody who rents a house for 1 year is still a resident, and we should provide them with ease of access to all the services we have, but also voting. I mean, essentially, 4 wards create such confusion for Villanova students that they were effectively disenfranchised. They thought they would be registered because they registered in one place. You know, they show up the same place the next year and it's in the wrong place. So I feel like, I mean, if we aren't helping our new, young, eager voters to make it as easy as possible to get out and have their voice heard, election days fall on days when they are here. And so, you know, it doesn't have to be the be-all, end-all of this map. I wanted it to be in 2. It looks like we might have to end up with 3. I would be okay with that, but the effort to get as many young people knowledgeable about voting, access to voting, to me is a very important issue. So I do disagree with you there.
That's not the issue. The issue is, are these people residents of the state?
They are when they're living here, and they are when they're contributing to our community and our economy.
So they have Pennsylvania. They all have Pennsylvania
driver's license. They do. If they're registered to vote here, yes, they do.
They all have Pennsylvania driver's license?
So they may or may not, but they have the right to register here if they want to. Civic engagement starts when you're 18,
Sure.
end of story.
So
if they choose to register here,
So
if they
if
choose to
they're
get their driver's
registered-
license here for 4 years, then so be it.
Okay.
It's
So-
the
so
law.
if they're registered here
It's
and
the
they're
law.
also registered in
Yes.
New Jersey, that creates a big problem. You can't be registered in 2 places.
You cannot
No,
be
so they
registered in 2
register
places, but
here
they
and they
have the
vote
right
here.
to vote here if they
Because they
want
live
to and
here.
register here if they want to.
I think the common sense people, the common sense at home, that people understand what I'm saying.
All right.
Thanks.
Can we just get back to the map? And option B, even version 2, would put Eastern University in 1.
Yes.
Okay, I think that's a positive. Yeah, so I'd be okay with option B if we were to look at version 2.
I would support that.
I'm okay with that map. I'm seeing some nods, and you have been very patient and really very good helping us through this process. I would like to open it up to, if commissioners are done for the moment, I'd like to open it up for public comment. If anybody would care to say something about the maps, please come up.
Would it be okay if I just added one additional thing? I wanted to add as an additional point, and I don't think that this got out there, there is no seat in Radnor Township at the State House level, the State Senate level, the Pennsylvania House of Representatives level, or any other government level, which is going to be affected by our map. We've also been calling it redistricting. I've been asked by the school district to make clear that it has nothing to do with where you send your children to school. It's just an unfortunate coincidence that we call it redistricting and they call themselves the school district. So this will not affect where you send the kids to school at all. The only elections that these will have a direct impact on is for the currently 6, soon to be 7 of us.
As well as the judge of elections and inspector of elections at each ward and precinct.
That's true. That's an important distinction.
And Commissioner Larkin, when would this take effect?
So our subcommittee recommended that it would take effect at the next election. That was the vote.
So can you change this from redistricting to rewarding? Seriously, but RA dash, not like reward, like we're getting a present.
The state law is called the Municipal Reapportionment Act.
Would anybody like to speak to the reapportionment maps?
Hi, Baron Gemmer, South Wayne Avenue. I'd also like to thank Amanda for all her work. This is not an easy job when you're dealing with census blocks. And I'm almost eating the mic here. Boy, I have to get really close. All right, I'll if I start pushing against it, let me know. Thank Amanda. It's with dealing with the census blocks is a lot of trouble, and then you this is where you couldn't hear me before. Okay. What, that you don't hear me? Wanted to talk about, Commissioner Mulroney mentioned about the 6 months. There were 3 meetings for the redistricting. The first one was an introduction just to go over some of the basics, which you asked Amanda to go over tonight. Then at the second meeting was on October 11th, which is where the 3 plans were presented in blockish form, much like this. It wasn't actually until November 4th of this month that they were online to see the kind of detail that Sean was alluding to and to be able to make these suggestions. And then the third and final meeting was November 15th. So that was the first time to get any public feedback on these maps. And I think, as has been said, the public overwhelmingly liked option C with perhaps some modifications. So while there's been community engagement, I'm not sure that community engagement had any effect on the process because there wasn't another meeting to make changes or look at any issues brought up. So basically it was whatever was presented back in October, those are the 3 coming forward. And yes, I was very surprised to see B in the packet because I attended all 3 and that's not the impression I got attending the last one, that's what would be brought forward. As a quick aside here, some of the things that we have to look at in terms of not moving people from one ward to another. I want to show you what the map was just a little over 10 years ago. Oh, I was going to I might use those later.
Okay. Totally your way.
If you look at what the map looked like a little more than 10 years ago, you can see, if you look at Ward 3 is over here. I mean, things have changed drastically, and that wasn't necessarily, the last change was done for some other reasons I won't go into that ended up with our current boundaries. But you can even see some of the neighborhoods that some of the modifications are trying to do, like right here where you get the Conestoga, Lancaster, where Commissioner Abel was talking about, where West Wayne and Bloomingdale and Lenore, they were all part of one neighborhood. So when the criteria was specified in terms of let's try and keep the boundaries as much as possible, not move people around, there's really nothing to comment on that until we see what the new population is. Once we saw the new population, then it was a chance to say, okay, let's correct some of these sins of the past that have taken place over the last 2 reapportionment cycles, which is why getting rid of this and that triangle there and putting it back in Ward 3. So you've got a boundary of Lancaster and Conestoga is good there. Basically, again, the public comment, both from the universities as well as the attendants, was in favor of C because it was more blockish, and it also did take Villanova down to just 2. Now, with that said, remember, the public has only seen original A, B, and C options. So this modified B and modified C, all we are seeing this for the first time here, we can't see it in any detail to know to comment on it. I will say, as Commissioner Abel has said, it's with this being added here, that was one of my requests because of knowing that neighborhood. It looks like there's a little portion that goes above Lancaster, but not nearly as much as in C, so that could be a positive. It looks like it still goes east of the Blue Route, which these people kind of feel left out compared to everybody else, but that might be a trade-off because it's either got to go this way or go that way, and now it goes a little less this way. So options B modified might be a reasonable alternative based upon what the public was trying to input last time about C. But it's very hard to comment on that because all we have is this block map to see right now. We can't take a look at the details and what the street boundaries actually are. So per the suggestion about the process, whether it's commissioner-based or public-based, there needs to be beyond when the maps are presented and available to the public, then that next meeting where there's public comment, there needs to be a meeting after that, because then otherwise there's no opportunity, and we get what Commissioner Mulroney is saying, oh, we've got to get this passed. Well, there was no opportunity to change the maps based upon public comment. And the changes that are made, the public hasn't even seen yet. So I understand that there's a modified C version also that does keep all the commissioners in their wards and make some of these other changes. To me, that might be a viable option also, because I think that actually made Ward 2 a little better in terms of keeping it east of King of Prussia the entire way. But again, we don't have those to even comment on. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment? Anything further from the commissioners? So we are looking at, the introduction is option B version 2. No. Please move.
I'd move that we introduce something that sounds more fancy than this, but option B version 2.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes with 5 votes. Commissioner Farhi is off the dais. Okay.
Before we go to the next item, we also talked about once this passes, that we believe it's beneficial for the township if the Board of Commissioners or the township recommended precinct lines to Delaware County.
So, go ahead.
I'm fine with precinct lines. I thought that we were really talking about polling places in particular. Precinct lines, I think that's fine too, but this is probably not the meeting to get into the details of where those are going to be because we don't have a map. But polling places, I would 100% want to recommend, particularly so students at Villanova have locations on campus.
I think it was both.
Mr. Rice, I think you have something.
Yeah,
You're right.
I think before you go there, the process is this ordinance will be advertised. The board will then vote on it. It goes to the Board of Elections. Board of Elections then has to make a recommendation on what you've done. They could change it. They usually don't. And then it goes to Court of Common Pleas. Judge has to approve it. So precinct lines, I think, get established by the Board of Elections also, not by this board.
But we can make a recommendation.
Yeah, you can.
So you're correct. Board of Elections will rule on the precinct lines, but I'm told, it's my understanding that they would take our advice.
Yeah, they will.
So.
But I think you got to get this, through that process, and I don't know, I went back and looked at what we did, I guess, Amanda, it was 6 years ago, 7 years ago. And, it moved into March, February, March. You started a little bit earlier. You passed this ordinance, I think, in November last time, like the middle of the month. So you're close. So it'll take some time down there. I've noticed some of these types of things because of the pandemic, people still haven't returned to work and things don't get done as quickly as they did 3 years ago or 4 years ago. But anyway, that's my only comment.
And you're right.
I
I'm
want to,
remembering now, we did say precinct lines as well as polling places. I remember that.
I want to talk about that. So if there is a Villanova precinct, and that's fine, that should be on Villanova campus, and you could have multiple, it may be out of one ward, but to have, to switch the wards at least in 7, and to move that to Villanova for the 7 residents that actually live in the neighborhoods and that are not students, that would be cumbersome. Most actually can walk, because 7 is so small, to those polling places, at least in 7-2. So if there is a Villanova, it would have to be, I think, is it Eastern or Cabrini? They have their own little, their smaller one. So I think that if you did have one, and during COVID, 7 had to vote at the Township building, which was not in the ward, but you should have one central location in Villanova for the Villanova students. So you may even need 3 precincts for Villanova if there's 3 wards where those students are in. Does that make sense to you? I'm sorry, does that make sense?
You're moving on to, I think, like the next process of it. So
Yeah, well,
we have to get through this, and then we're going to have the precinct line.
I just want to make sure that.
And then it's the polling place within the precinct is more of a decision from the
I don't
Board of
want my
Election.
message to get lost or.
I think Villanova would be a welcoming site for a polling place.
Yeah,
So
for the
it
students, but
should
not-
be considered,
Yeah,
yes.
but not for the residents.
Well, they've got good parking. Okay, well, we're going to see you at our next meeting. And thank you. Again, I just want to reiterate, your work on this has been really phenomenal, and thank you for getting us this far.
Thank you.
So we are moving on to our budget discussion. Ordinance 2022-16 is the adoption of the final 2023 comprehensive budget by setting the township real estate tax millage rate and adopting appropriations for 2023.
Almost.
I'm going to ask for a motion
So moved.
in a second. Thank you. The budget, thank you. And Mr. Tate or Mr. White, do you want to have anything to say about this?
Thank you, Madam President. Yes, this concludes the budgeting process that was started back in August when we discussed the budget calendar, and then followed by the Township Manager recommended budget presented in September, a couple of presentations in October from department heads, and discussing various services. And at our last meeting, the manager did present a final overview of the budget and the recommended tax levy for 2023. This ordinance before you tonight is to adopt what was introduced at the last meeting and set the millage rate for 2023.
Excellent, thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments on the comprehensive budget? Okay. Is there any public comment about the budget as proposed?
Can we just have a summary again? Budget, millage rate, what's the increase? And the average increase to the taxpayer?
The millage increase in a percentage is at 4.5%. The overall tax levy for next year increases to 2.3865 mils, and the average I apologize, it's not in front of me, but I think we were talking on average about $60 per year?
About $60.
About $68 per year for the average homeowner in Radnor Township.
Any other commissioner comments? Please, thank you, Sarah.
Sarah Pilling, 29 Garrett Avenue. I know this will make no difference in your decision, but I think it's important to be spoken. 25% of the non-student residents of Radnor Township are singles in households. 13.7% using the 2020 census, which was 33,000 plus a few numbers. 13.7% of the residents are 65 or over. They are on essentially fixed incomes, Social Security. So I know $60 is not a lot, but for a senior, that is not dipping into another pot. That's a further decision as to what you're going to give up. 5.8% of the residents of this township live below the poverty line. That is 2,288 people. $60 is a lot, boys and girls. It's a lot to seniors, and it's a lot in poverty. It needs to be said. It's not going to change you not raising the taxes by 4.5%, but it is going to sincerely affect about 6,500, 7,000 people who live here. And I think it needs to be said. Thank you. And especially because we're in a time of inflation with gas, which is fortunately coming down, but it's still, I just paid $3.69 a gallon for my little car at one of the cheaper gas stations. The cost of food is amazing. And the cost of heat and electricity and gas is all going up. And you have to be really smart or lucky or find someone who can help you fiddle with everything so that your increased expenses is not as severe. So it just needs to be said. We're not an insignificant part of the township, and this tax increase is going to be a burden because there's no extra pot or go earn some more money. It's what else are you going to give up in order to pay your taxes? Thank you.
Is there any other further public comment? I will call the vote. All in favor say aye. Opposed? It is a vote of 5-1. The next item on the agenda is Ordinance 2022-17, adoption establishing the sanitary sewer rent rate for 2023. May I hear a motion, please? And a second?
Second.
Is there any comments from commissioners? Is there any public comment? I'm going to call the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously. Ordinance 2022-18 is the introduction adopting the township fee schedule for 2023. May I hear a motion and a second? And as this is an introduction, Mr. Tate, can you walk us through this?
Thank you, Madam President. Happy to do so. As is customary each year with the adoption of the budget and the tax levy and the setting the sanitary sewer rent rate, we do introduce and adopt a fee schedule annually that sets various fees, permits, and other costs that the either by residents, developers, those in the township are can follow. And the fees are essentially outlined in the document attached. Changes this year include several sections that are removed related to the health department function being assumed by the county. Mr. Kachansky can address any particulars related to that, as well as some adjustments in fees and penalties for services provided through the Community Development Department, and other minor adjustments in the engineering section as it relates to our professional consultants. Mr. Norsini can address any particulars as relates to those fees.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Mr. Kachansky, can you highlight some of the issues?
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam President. As Mr. Tate indicated, there are two general areas under the community development section. One, removing these fees associated with services that are now offered by the County Health Department, such as commercial pool inspections and inspections of food facilities. Those were the two primary ones under that now fall under the County Health Department. And the second general area is really increasing fees to serve as a deterrent to certain behaviors by contractors, landlords, generally residents, that are causing strain on staffing resources and causing delays in our process to move through paperwork without having to duplicate our efforts, and is delaying our ability to respond to other residents that are following the laws in a more timely manner. So we thought that since these issues kept coming up over the years, that the current fees were not sufficient to offer a deterrent to those behaviors.
And just for specifics, that looks like doubling, right? So I'm looking at it goes from 100 to 200, and if you're beyond a certain date, 150 to 300. Is that right?
Correct.
Am I looking at the right
I think
section?
You're looking at rental housing renewal. In most cases, a rental housing renewal is at the end of June.
Yeah.
We processed some this year in October and the beginning of November. We have to notice after notice and posting them. So we're doing a lot of work chasing these things for really, in most cases, is a $60 annual renewal fee.
Thank you. And Mr. Norsini, do you want to flag some highlights in your area?
Thank you, Madam President. Just to be clear, none of our permit fees have raised. What Mr. Tate was referring to with our consultants was a raise in their prices annually, which occurs throughout. And they are pass-through costs for plan reviews, so it's not at a cost to the township. They are passed-through. And the one new item is the dumpster and storage container permit. That's for when folks wish to leave a brand name pod or a dumpster on the street. So that's a $80 permit fee, and it's $20 a day. And that does involve staff, whether it be engineering or public works, to go view the locations at times to make sure it's not a traffic hazard. And it's not to disincentivize, but it's not to incentivize the parking of dumpsters or pods on the street.
Thank you very much. Is there any question or comment from commissioners? Is there any comment from the public? I will call the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. And opposed. Sorry, I think we got a unanimous on that. Thank you very much. So that is the conclusion of our business agenda. I do want to just take a minute to thank everyone who worked so hard on the budget. I know the commissioners were very engaged in good conversations, perhaps leading to some change in certain areas in the upcoming year. But thank you, Mr. Tate, Bill White, and everyone else who, the department heads who submitted their budgets, and you got us through it. It does weigh on me heavily that when we are asking for an increase in a millage rate, it is going to affect people, whether it is $60 or not. I'm really proud of the fact that we took the opportunity to adopt the tax waivers and special programs for those who are elderly, widowed, and experiencing some disability. So it may not help everybody, but it will help some, and I'm grateful for that being brought forward by staff as well. So that concludes the business agenda, and I will move to reports of board liaisons. Is there any report from a committee or commission?
Sure. So one, I'm the liaison to the Board of Health, and most of it does not need to be reported, but one thing that did come up is the controversy over these barriers in respiratory viral season, if you will. And the Board of Health felt strongly, unanimously, that now is not the time to take down the barriers. RSV, influenza, as well as COVID, and para-influenza, there are a lot of other respiratory viruses out there, are out of control this year. I mean, COVID numbers might seem pretty good, but they're significant still, and the influenza numbers are huge. And RSV, which isn't such an issue for this age population, is horrible this year. So they really felt like we should wait until May and reconsider it then.
Thank you. Other reports?
Yeah, and monkeypox, too. Oh, is it? But the virus, it'll go away once it's warmer. It'll be a miracle. Anyway, just want to thank Tammy Cohen for everything that she does when it comes to the parks and recreation. So on Sunday, not Saturday, starting around noon, we're going to have the Santa's delivery. So we're having 5 fire trucks from different, I guess even actually 3 counties. So Montgomery, Chester, as well as Radnor. So Bryn Mawr and I think Berwyn, Radnor, Broomall, and there's one more, maybe King of Prussia? Is it King of Prussia? There's one more? Broomall. There's 5 though. I'm missing one, but I know that Tammy did a great job giving a highlight on her Parks and Rec page. So please, when you get a chance, go there, and it's really a great way to get involved. If you have kids, you get to meet different people from the township, as well as it's a great way to thank a firefighter, which is important. There is the Sweetheart Dance, and that is coming up in February, and that is something that if that's something that you and your child would like to go, it is always recommended that you are on your computer 5 minutes prior to the opening, because it will close in a matter of minutes, and that is at the Villanova Conference Center. And then there are also some other wonderful events, such as pickleball tournaments and basketball tournaments, I think, and tennis to sign up for. So there's a lot of wonderful things that Tammy and the rest of her crew, they do a wonderful job. And yeah, and just a quick little thanks. There's a tree lighting in Wayne that's coming up, but there was a tree lighting in Garrett Hill. So just want to say the township, the police, Bryn Mawr Fire, as well as several township, that's Billy Gallagher, as well as Tim McGee. They do a bang-up job. Mike Marietta, he's in our Public Works Department. He did a great job with that, too, as well as Tim Hampshire, my neighbor. Thank you, and they're there to keep the legacy of Jim Pacioli alive. So sorry for the long-winded holiday edition of Parks and Rec, but thanks.
But I think we have an answer to the 5th fire truck.
Yeah, so Tammy is working, they've got the 5 routes nailed down. 3 of the fire companies have committed. We're waiting on a commitment from the 4th, and we think that 1 route this year may not have a fire truck. But this has always been, a partnership between our fire companies that service this town, along with our police department, public works, and recreation department. So no matter what route you're on, you're going to be well represented by the folks either as part of this staff or as part of our fire companies bringing those presents out along with Santa.
And Santa magically makes it to all 5 routes. Magic of Christmas.
Don't tell my 7-year-old.
No, I'm saying he makes it to all the routes.
It's really fast.
Santa Claus.
If he
Yep.
can get around the world, he can get around
Exactly.
5 routes.
Exactly. Any other committee reports?
Yeah, so I'm the library liaison, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Elves for the Shelves run this Saturday at 8 a.m. It's not too late to sign up. You have until December 2nd to do so, and it's a really fun time. If you don't run, you can walk it. I think it's $20 if you want to do the fun run and $30 if you'd like to do the 5K.
Okay, is that all of our reports? Any new business? Any old business? I will call for final public participation. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Please come up. And please state your name.
Hello, how are you? Chris Bell. I'm at 420 West Avenue. Just here to share my support for the St. Honore project. There wasn't public comment earlier, so I just say till now. I just wanted to say I think it's a great proposal, plan as is, and hope that you all vote for it as is. And you had mentioned the Shade Tree Commission and watching that, and if you do watch that, just know that I'm also one of the neighbors. The meeting kind of went a little awry, so I was not able to attend, but I then have come since to the Planning Commission, and I'm here tonight to voice my support for it. And so, you know, I have 2 small children, and the fact that trees are coming down currently without doing anything is worrisome, and now that they're going to take care of that, it's phenomenal. So I just think that that should be known. And I also think that when we're talking about sidewalks, we should have sidewalks and not, you know, work around trees that are existing, because that was another concern of the shade tree, you know, losing, I think, 6 trees, but it's worth it to have sidewalks. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comment, and thank you for waiting till the end of the meeting. Does anybody else want to make a comment? Okay, I will call for a motion to adjourn and a second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Good night.